guys, what's up? This is Kate with Beach Moto, and joining me today is Oscar Solis with Pirelli, and he is going to be answering some tire questions for us. So, Oscar, thank you so much for joining us and chatting with us today.
Yeah,
Um,
no, for having me, and sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm on my phone here.
no worries.
Hopefully, the video will be okay.
Yeah, this is the new normal, with the whole COVID and quarantine. I think people are getting used to this sort of situation.
Yeah, I think so as well.
So the most common thing that we always, get questions about is the tire pressures. So let's talk about that for a second. So A, why are tire pressures so important? B, how often should they get checked? And, basically, how would you go about finding out what the right pressures for your bike are?
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's a good question because it's one of the things that maybe on the bike that's actually disregarded a lot too when you go riding and such. People wash their bikes all the time. They touch this and that windscreen, everything gets cleaned up. Tires kind of get put on and then they're just almost forgotten. So it's very unfortunate because it's a really important part of the bike for sure. So your questions, yeah. So what you're supposed to do is every time you go for a ride is to check your pressures.
Uh,
Uh, I'm sure about 95 to 99% of the people out there don't do that, and they just kind of set it and forget it. So you should be doing it before every ride. A couple of reasons, obviously. One is, make sure it's in the range that it should be, which we'll talk about what pressures those are later. And then, just to save you some dollars, if it's off one way or another, you could actually be losing money and prematurely wearing your tires. So what I would say is, yes, before every ride. If you're not like me and get paid to do tire stuff for your motorcycle, then I would say, it's mostly important when there's a weather change. If it gets cold or if it gets hot, or if there's kind of a differentiation in weather or temperature, take a look at it because that'll help. And I will say, like you said, my main title is actually road racing. So I work a lot with like World Superbike guys. I do racing more than anything else. I will tell you the number one cause for bad wear is your air gauge is actually off, and not a lot of people know that either. That's kind of the number one culprit. Is even like I said, I was in California a couple of weeks ago. Well, like I said before this interview, but I was out there and we checked about 10 gauges and about 6 of them were off, as high as 4 psi.
Really?
So yeah, so
Do
that
you have a recommendation or a preference as far as like digital tire pressure gauge or an analog one? And is there a particular brand that you guys prefer?
the most popular the track looks to be Motion Pro. The Motion Pro one's digital and analog. The pros and cons are digital is great because you could just calibrate it on the fly. You don't have to really worry about oil or anything like that because a lot of analogs have oil. But then you have to worry about batteries, and that's one more thing that you have to worry about on the road. So the analogs have been good. They've been tried and true, but that's not like a personal recommendation. That's what a lot of people are using at the track. And so I would look at those, and there's some other high-end ones. There's some low-end ones. Really doesn't matter as long as it's true, as long as it's doing its job how it should be doing. I've
Yeah.
seen racers with the old, I mean, you've probably seen your dad with it, the old like stick one,
Yeah,
mechanical one.
gas station. Yeah.
Yep. I've seen a couple of racers with those and they've been on. So as long as it's true, that's all that matters.
Yeah. And
Try to check it before you ride. If
yeah,
not, most importantly is when there's a difference in weather, because if it gets cold, your pressures will go down. If it gets
yeah,
hot, your pressures will go up.
yeah.
And so people need to realize that.
And you mentioned that like not checking your tire pressures on a regular basis could cause improper tire wear or wear out your tire quicker. But it could cause some safety issues as well, right? Especially, and this is like just a side note for everyone. When you guys go get your tires like replaced at a shop or at a dealership, in order to put your tire onto the wheel, they have to inflate it to a really high PSI. And, if it's a really good shop, they'll drop it back down to where it's supposed to be before handing over the bike to you. But I've seen it happen so many times where, you know, the mechanic forgets or whatnot. So, you know, you go off to drive off on your bike and you're sitting at like 45, 50 PSI, which, correct me if I'm wrong, could be extremely dangerous, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, working with tires and stuff like that. I used to be a vendor and I used to install tires before. I've probably done, I don't know, about 15,000 in my life. Seriously. So we do that a lot. When you have to pop the bead or have the bead set on the tire, it needs to go pretty high. You know, 40 psi, 50 psi is not uncommon. And shops get busy, vendors get busy, and they just kind of leave it there and say, hey, here's your tire, and leave it to you to kind of set your pressures. Well, either if you're at the track or in the garage, you get excited to put the tire on. That's one thing you forget to do is check your pressure before
Yeah.
each run. And so there you go, right? So yeah, exactly. And if the tire is too low, so, you know, crash course, heat comes from mostly from tire deflection as it squats basically as you run the tire through the wheel and you go for a ride. Deflection is actually what creates the most heat. Another byproduct is actually friction with the road itself.
Okay.
And so a lower pressure increases both of those.
Okay.
So a lower pressure actually create more heat in your tire, and that's why it's a safety concern as well. If it's too low, you know, the rims on the side of the tire, the rims will actually start squatting more and more, come in contact with the road as you lean over and ride aggressively. And again, you could actually pinch your tire against whatever curb, even the road itself, if it's that low. So hopefully you could feel and say, hey, there's something wrong here. Yeah, okay, my tire's too low. So that's the main things with tires, pressures being too low is that there's a lot more heat that could build up, and your tires will feel very, very sluggish. And again, the wear pattern will be not what you want it to be. You'll curse Pirelli because, hey, my tire went out in like 1,000 miles and something like that. We're like, you were running at 6 psi, dude. That's
Yeah.
not. So that's for it being too low. If it's too high, the major disadvantage is your contact patch goes away, right? The profile, instead of being semi-flat as you're going through, it's going to be just so pronounced, and that's less tire that's actually hitting the ground, and that's a safety concern as well. Not only that, but you're only riding on a small piece of contact patch instead of the bigger contact patch. So you're creating a lot more heat in just that one area with the friction that we were talking about. There's so much more friction in that small patch. And so that gets heated a little bit more. And you know, obviously adverse wear and such. So, and the other problem with being too low pressure is when you're riding on the street, it's hard with one hand because I'm holding my phone. When you're riding on the street, there's tread voids. There you go, tread voids like on the tire.
Yep,
Those
yep.
will actually close up with too low of a pressure. And
Oh.
so if you're riding in rain or something like that, these voids are supposed to spit rain out to the side of the tire. It can't do it as well if it has too low of a pressure as well.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah. So that's in a nutshell about you know, pressure too low, too high. Recommended pressure is actually up to the bike manufacturer.
That's what I was going to ask, because yeah, the manufacturers, they always, you know, whether it be in the manual or sometimes, you know, on the sticker on the frame of your bike, will give you the recommended PSIs. So whether they're on a stock tire, you know, that was on the bike when they purchased it, or an aftermarket tire that, you know, they upgraded to, they should still stick to that recommended pressure by the manufacturer, regardless of the tire.
Correct, because there's a disclaimer. The bike manufacturers will actually kind of homologate or suggest what tires should go on the bike. If it's not OEM, you should try to have this tire that's on the bike.
Okay.
So when we construct the tire, we have a certain group or segment in mind. So, you know, the tire construction will have a certain weight that it has to have, so the carcass will be so stiff, or will have so much wear rating on the tire. We don't have a wear rating exactly like cars where they have like an A, AA, B, or anything like that. But we know what kind of segment we're building a tire for, so we'll try to have this compound to be the choice that the segment would like to have.
Okay.
And so these things combined will be for this type of bike. So again, you know, talk to the manufacturer, look at their website, see what tire groups that they recommend, and then use those pressures, because it's also hard for us to say, hey, we're going to build this tire for every motorcycle that's out there. It's
Right.
not really. So we leave it up to the manufacturers to say, hey, this is the tire that I want on the bike, and this is the pressure we like to have on it because of the horsepower, because of the suspension setting, because of how much the bike weighs.
Okay.
So they have more of a focused idea of what they want for their motorcycle. We don't.
Okay, and would that be also the case for, let's say I do take my street bike to the track with, still DOT approved tires. At that point, would I go based off of Pirelli recommendations on what the track pressures are, or still stick with the manufacturer pressures?
Yeah, that's a good question, because you're like, no, the bike says I should run out this. Yeah, you have to keep the type of riding in mind for sure. If you're doing commuting, you probably want to be in higher pressures because, again, as adverse conditions, you want to get as much wear out of the tires as much as possible. Canyons, again, it's up to you guys. It's your bike, it's your tires at that point. If you want to drop down a couple PSI because you don't care about wear so much, you want a little bit more grip and spirited feel, fine. The track is a whole different animal. It's not a highway anymore. It's not I'll say highway. It's not a city street anymore. So we go to a racetrack. If you're up in those high pressures, you can ride it. It probably won't be the best for you. It won't give you the most amount of grip. It's going to be probably the things that you don't want to have happen because it's not commuting anymore. It's running on the track. Right. So I would definitely get in touch with the trackside vendor, see what they recommend for pressures. Saying that, riding a street tire on the track, it's not going to instantly go up in flames and things are going to go bad and everything's going to go out the door. With everything else in life, including alcohol and video games, a balance is needed. So, if you want to give up some of your longevity, durability of the tires so that way you have a little bit more grip, sure, we could do that. Change your pressures. If you want a little bit more grip than this tires has, okay, well, you have to go with these other tires, kind of like the Pirelli Super Corsa tires, SPs, SC, race DOTs, or even slicks. So it's pretty diverse, and it's in that sense, it might be that whole black magic, I don't know about my tires things. That's why you have tire guys. Go ahead and ask them about that. But riding a street tire on the track, again, is not detrimental. However, it's not going to give you the best grip possible for sure, 100%.
Gotcha. And, you mentioned a couple of the tire models that you guys offer. How would one go about choosing the best tire for their type of riding, their type of motorcycle? And is there a particular tire, let's say the Super Corsas, which are obviously a very aggressive sport tire, if you were to have, your average rider put it on their bike just for commuting, is there a disadvantage to using such an aggressive tire for just strict commuting?
Yes and no. So the advantages are, of course, it's a very grippy tire. The Super Corsa SP is street oriented, DOT approved, no issues there at all. Is it going to handle adverse conditions like an Angel GT, probably Angel GT? Absolutely not. Angel GT has a different compound blend. It's going to handle those adverse conditions, cold conditions, a lot more. So you really have to do a little bit of research to see which tires is the best for you, because, do you want one that's going to give you the most mileage? And hey, look at that, there's a rainstorm, I better, pull over so that way my tires, don't throw me on my head or anything like that. No, there's tires for that. There's ones that are kind of in the middle, the Rosso 3, Rosso Corsa 2s are kind of in that segment. And then, of course, Super Corsa family is just ultra aggressive, not the best in adverse conditions, but really nice tires, but not the most durable. So you got to do a little bit of research and see, again, what bike do you have, what kind of riding you're going to do, and what those tires are, 100%.
Gotcha. Okay. And let's talk a little bit about tire wear. So many of people, our customers and people I know, they change their tires when it's very obvious that they need to be changed, meaning there's very thread left or sometimes even the wire showing. But obviously that's not the proper or the safe way to do it. What is the proper way to know when it's time to change it? Maybe talk to us a little bit about the wear bars and how to read them, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, obviously, there are people who kind of push the envelope and try to, I'm going to get every dime I can out of this tire. It's probably not the smart thing to do because, you know, body work is expensive. I mean, you guys sell apparel, so maybe it's a good thing, but not a good time. So let's
Point.
try to be, um, so again, I'm going to point to my shirt. So in the tread, voids here, you'll see like in one of these little tread voids on your tires, you'll see a little wear bar. It's a little kind of it's kind of almost like a speed bump looking thing in the tread wear bar, and that is your wear bar. So what we've done is we recommended, hey, once it hits that wear bar, once your tread is now flush with that wear bar, you should kind of think about replacing this tire. And it's even more important in places with adverse conditions like the Northwest, anywhere north or anything like that, anywhere where they have a lot of rain, because as that tread gets smaller and smaller and smaller, that's going to be less, I'm going to say less of a canyon tread groove to get all that rain and everything out of there as well. So again, couple that, and if you're like, hey, I'm not checking my pressures, I checked it this year already, I'm not checking it ever again, you know, that's a double negative. So we need to make sure that you guys are safe out there. You look at your wear bars, you check your pressures, and that's when you could see, hey, all right, we're starting to get down there, and we need to go ahead and start getting this tire replaced and getting a new one on there.
Okay, don't, your wires should not be showing before you change your tires, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, we make good tires, but we kind of stop where the rubber stops. So yeah, do that.
So are all your DOT tires okay to use on track? And it just depends on, how aggressive you ride, as far as like which tire you should choose. But in general, any street tire could be used on track, right?
Yeah, I mean, in general, any street tire could be used on track. Not every track tire could be used on the street for sure. So
But
yeah,
we're mainly talking about the slicks, right?
or rain tires, right? Rain tires cannot be used on the street.
Oh, is that right? See, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So so if I see one, I was like, I don't see that, I don't hear it, nothing like that, because it's a big no-no. They're not approved to be on the street. So rain tires or slick tires, absolutely not. So and again, street tires are acceptable to be used on the track, even if it's Angel GT, which is our sport touring. I just got 15,000 miles out of this tire. There's been riders that have used it on the track. If your goal is to go out there and break a lap record, that's not going to happen on an Angel GT. And don't ask me what pressure that you could do that at, because it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But if you get your more sportier ones, the Rosa 3, Rosa Corsa 2, they're there. But their limitations are, come with the balance again. When you use street tires on the track, one of the biggest questions I get is, can we use tire warmers? Should we use tire warmers?
That's one of my questions, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, here we go. So, warmers is a good question. And warmers help get a tire to a operating range. Certain tires have certain operating ranges. So like the Angel GT2, it's not going to be like our Pirelli Superbike SE0, right? It's made to be at a lower operating range. Rosso 3 is maybe a little wider, Rosso Corsa 2 a little bit wider, and then you get a little bit more like focused in a different direction. And I mean that by SE0 has to have kind of high temperature range. If you go below that temperature range, then you're cooling the compound down to a range that it wasn't really made to be ran at. So keeping that in perspective, can you use warmers on street tires? Absolutely, 100%. Do I recommend it? I do. And I do because I say that you want to get it to its operating range, and that's it. Don't go higher. There's no need to put it on the warmer at 200 degrees for an hour and a half if you have a Rosso 3 Angel GT, Rosso Corsa 2, and maybe not even an SP, right? Super Corsa SP. What I do know is, like, when you ride on the street, I'm like, don't quote me on this, even though I'm on video, but like, majority of the time, if you're riding 5 or 10 minutes, you kind of get to operating range. And that's somewhere like 130 degrees, higher, lower, depending on how you ride. and depending on the tire as well, right? Supercourse SP is actually more useful at a higher temperature range than an Angel GT2.
Okay. So
So
basically, it's okay to use tire warmers on street tires, on DOT tires, but it's not necessary, right? Because they do get up to temperature very fast once you get on track.
correct. Yeah, they'll get up temperature pretty quickly. Within 2 laps, the majority of the tires out there. If you absolutely want to use warmers and get it up to temperature before your bike is even off the stands, just use them for like 15 minutes. Warmers about 135 degrees, 15 minutes, just to get them warm, not hot. Because if you get them hot, if they're 200 degrees, now those street tires are above the range that they're manufactured to be used at, and they're actually not going to be as grippy or as usable for the first couple of laps until it turns back down to the temperature that they're actually supposed to be used at. That makes sense.
That's interesting. So if they're at such a high temperature, there is a chance for them to actually go down in temperature once you hit the
yeah, absolutely. Because most of the riders that use street tires, they don't produce enough heat to get them to 200 degrees or anything like that. They'll actually come back down to 150, 140 degrees or somewhere on there.
I got you.
And these are all just example temperatures. These are something so that way we can relate to it. It's not to the degree, but at least it gives you some sort of reference of what's going on. Why did I put this thing on an hour and a half on the warmer at 200 degrees and they feel so, what's wrong with you, Pirelli? Well, it's not our fault. They were just on the warmers too long, and they were not made to be at that temperature.
I gotcha. And what is a good, procedure, I guess, for warming up your tires if you're not using warmers? So you see, guys doing the weaving back and forth. Does that, like, I've heard different things, but for the most part, does that really warm up your tires, or is there a better procedure for doing so?
Yeah, the whole NASCAR shuffle, Formula One shuffle on. No, that does not do it. So if you remember earlier on, I said the 2 ways that you create heat is by deflection, and that's majority of the way, and the other one is actually friction, right? And that friction will happen no matter where you're at on the tire. If you're on the top of the tire, side of the tire, that friction will happen. Deflection will happen mostly when you're up and down, to be quite honest, because if you go on one side, you deflect on this side, but the other side is just solid up in the air and not really deflecting, if that makes sense.
Right.
So to get my most even deflection on both sides, that's my little hand gesture, sorry. You want to kind of be more up and down the tires so both sidewalls kind of deflect. And it's not the sidewall deflection that does it most, but it's the more carcass deflection that happens. So saying that, and this is real life experience, Pikes Peak Hill Climb. I worked out there for the last 8 years. Most challenging race, I think, on the planet.
Really?
Yep. I helped design tires for Daytona. I've done a lot of stuff with other tracks, of course. It's kind of my job to do that. Pikes Peak is the most demanding. We start practicing at 4 a.m. Ground temperature could be 32 degrees. That's Fahrenheit. And so heat is very important for these tires because we actually use race tires when we do it. So one of the best advice I give them is on the way back down is to really kind of mash on the brakes, accelerate hard, straight up and down. So that way they could create and keep as much heat as possible. The NASCAR shuffle is not going to do it for you.
Okay, yeah, so accelerate and hard braking gets way more heat into your tires.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good to know because I think the shuffle is the most common way, and I've heard that it doesn't do a whole lot. So I'm glad that you confirmed that. Now, so tires are obviously expensive, or they can get expensive. What do you think about people patching their tires? So I got a nail in my tire, now there's a hole in it, and I don't want to buy a new one. I'm just going to patch it up. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's not good. One for street tires, it voids your warranty, right? So you can't go back and say, hey, I've got this tire, something else happened to it. Even if it was a manufacturer defect, we say, well, it's plugged, you can't do it. The other thing why I don't like it at all is that the safety hazard is there that you only have one tire in front, one tire in rear. It's not like car we're talking about here. And so, if that thing, deflates after a while, you're stuck in the middle of nowhere or whatever, it's not a really good safety net. not only that, but there's a lot of stress that goes on these tires. And so if that plug or patch is installed improperly or such, again, it's not a good safety net. So no, we don't recommend plugs or patches at all.
Okay. And if you happen to buy a used motorcycle that's been, sitting in somebody's garage for 10 years and the tires still look decent, but do tires have an expiration date? Like if a tire is that old, will it still work or does it need to be replaced?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of here's what I'm going to say, is if the tire is new and hasn't been used yet, then, at 7 years, we pretty much say, hey, you might want to look at it and say, maybe it's a little older. Our department, and especially people who make the tires, really don't have any kind of expiration date on the tires, especially commercial tires, street tires. But the caveat is how it's stored, right? So if it's stored in a non-breathable bag that the sun will never reach and it's climate controlled, that tire is going to be a lot better than a tire that has been just been in a warehouse where it's been freezing and not been good or anything like that, and not been climate controlled. So sorry, I'm trying to explain this in a way where, like, if it's got a lot of temperature swings, sorry, I've got to let it in my house. So this is the whole COVID thing going on, right? If it's been stored cold and then it has a big temperature swing where it's gone really hot and then back cold, back hot, and it does that like almost every day, that's an extreme example, and the sun is beating on it, that tire, even though it's been in that condition for 3 years versus a tire that's been stored properly and has been there for about 8 years properly, I'd rather take the tire that's been there for 8 years. Okay. Absolutely. So that's the important part of all this stuff. Sorry, I'm getting my camera lit. Sorry.
You're fine. Yeah, and I guess there's no really way to tell. I mean, if you're buying a used motorcycle, is there a way to tell how old that tire is?
Yeah, it's tough. And the technical part of this is it really depends on how much oil is left in the tire, right? If that oil is what keeps the tire kind of fresh and grip and all that fun stuff. If you could tell me how much oil's in that tire, I could tell you if it's good or bad. But it's really difficult for you to tell me that. So, of course, a new tire is going to be, the probability is it's going to be in a better state. Definitely look for cracks. And look for, there's the fingernail test, right? If you put your fingernail, is it very hard or is it not? And that kind of helps gives you a little bit more of an idea how that tire is going to be.
Gotcha. Okay. Now let's talk about tire size real quick. So, I have some friends who are, riding a 600, with a 180 rear tire, and they use like 190 or 200 tires on the back. And I always feel like the motorcycle manufacturers know what tire is best for that, what size tire is best for that bike, so it's better to stick with it. But they seem to think that you would get more grip by putting a wider tire on the back. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a good question because that happens a lot at the racetrack, to be honest. I understand why some people do it. I don't understand why some people do it at the same time. So, correct. When we build a tire, especially if we build a particular size, we have a rim size in mind that we're building this tire for. Like you said, 600, or I should say more specifically, the 5.5 inch wide rims. Pirelli's popular sports size is a 180/60. Fine. We're riding around the R6, and I say, hey, I want more grip out of this thing. I'm going to put a 200. Sweet. Awesome. Sounds like a good idea. Put the 200 on there. So now the same size rim, you've got a wider tire, right? So now what you've done is you squeezed a wide tire and you squeezed it more. So you've changed the profile of that tire. And so what happens is when we built that 180/60 for that 5.5 rim, we've taken everything in consideration, including the profile and also how that tire squishes down when you're on the sidewall, how the tire squishes down when you're on top, and everything in that aspect. So when you change and you put a 200 on there, you change that dynamic of the tire, right? Now, the bigger tire, 600, not as much horsepower as 1,000, which usually has a 6.0 rim. So that horsepower is not going to deflect the tire as much. It's not going to squat the tire as much. It's not going to deflect the sidewall as much. So then you actually have less of a contact patch in some instance when you go to this bigger tire. And you also have a tire that you're not going to get over the edge as much. And so it really kind of, it has a negative effect in some instances. So again, I would run the tire that it was made for that size rim on the front and the rear, because we built that tire for that.
Okay.
Again, carcass is going to be different from Pirelli Diablo Superbike as an Angel GT2. So, again, we keep that in mind, knowing what segment it's going to be used for as well.
Gotcha. So in short, stick with the manufacturer recommendations as far as tire size.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with some of those guys who are like, the engineers built it for a reason. We did.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what I always think. So now when you throw on new tires onto your bike, they're obviously extremely slippery. So is there a proper procedure for breaking new tires, or you just kind of ride carefully and hope for the best?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's been a stigmata in the past. It's hard for me to focus because I see out my window my dog has this tennis ball and begging me to go play. So yeah, there's been a stigmata in the past about, we put on, we shellac this kind of release compound on the exterior of the tire, the tread of the tire and stuff. So that way when we build it, we could just peel the tire right off of the mold when it's getting cooked. That's not the case anymore. So there's no real release compound. The main reason for having a break-in period is if you look at a new tire, it's really, really smooth.
Right.
And so tires have mechanical grip and compound grip, or chemical grip, right? So the chemical grip is with the compound. Mechanical grip is how it actually claws at the surface of the asphalt, concrete, whatever you're riding on. There's little divots that actually go in there and mechanically kind of increase the friction between the tire and the road. Well, those divots are not there on a new tire. And so the break-in period is actually to create that inconsistency in the surface. Okay. So that we have the mechanical grip. That's pretty much it. Okay. So street, we say, hey, 50 miles, somewhere around there, try to get both sides, break that tire in. Race, I mean, warm-up lap, that's all you need, really.
Yeah. So we've heard the expression "scrub your tire." That doesn't actually mean take a rough sponge and scrub your tire, right?
Right, exactly. Yep, exactly. So scrub your tire in, just go for a quick jaunt, and that'll be it. Don't waste the sandpaper. Go have fun instead, and go for a nice little easy jog.
Gotcha. Well, I think that covers a lot of information. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us and answer some of these questions. I am sure a lot of people will find it really helpful. Harley guys, gotta love them.
Yeah, absolutely. Street tires.
So again, thanks so much. And we'll provide people with your cell phone in case they have any further questions. Just kidding.
Yeah, make sure they go through you first. If you could screen those calls, that'd be great.
I'll screen them for you. All right, thanks, Oscar. Have a good one.
Thanks for having me on. Sorry for the phone thing, and I appreciate you having me.
All right, take care.